Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining tonight on this webinar. And we'll just give a chance for everybody to get into the meeting. So thank you for your patience. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar tonight on Ontario land construction safety. Thank you for your patience while we wait for all of our neighbors to join. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. We'll begin shortly. We're just letting everybody get into the meeting. Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting for everybody to have a chance to get in before we begin. Thank you very much for joining tonight.
Paula Fletcher.
Good evening, everyone. There's still a few more people that are joining our webinar tonight, Ontario Construction Line Safety. But we'll start, and just like to call on Trustee Sara Ehrhardt to do the Indigenous land acknowledgement tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Paula Fletcher. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We do have quite a lot of people here tonight, but I'm just going to, City Councillor Paula Fletcher here, I'm going to open that up for Peter Tabuns for some opening remarks.
Paula, thanks for that. And good evening, everyone. I want to thank Councillor Fletcher for pulling this together, to Trustee Sara Ehrhardt for being here this evening, and also to thank Metrolinx and the contractor GIP for joining us. As everyone is aware, there was a terrible accident at Pape and Mortimer recently, where a local resident was badly injured by a haulage truck employed by a company under contract to one of the contractors working for Metrolinx. I know everyone was really disturbed by the accident, and we all hope for the best for the person who was injured. The accident caused a lot of concern in this community, and this session this evening is being held to give people an opportunity to pose questions, make suggestions, and hopefully show the way to a safer process in the months and years to come. Before we get into this all, I wanted to set out some context. I think everyone would agree that we need more transit and we need it really badly. And as you who are part of this event this evening know, I go door to door throughout the community talking to people on a constant basis. And people are pretty clear that we need the transit, and even an awful lot of people who are severely inconvenienced. I also find that people believe that doing construction in built-up areas means there has to be far greater attention paid to safety issues and to causing inconvenience in people's lives. People work from home in a way they didn't 10 years ago. And so daytime noise is not just a minor inconvenience. It can have a huge impact on household income. Note that the Ontario line is going above ground for a fair distance in our community, and that alone is causing a lot of difficulties, although that's not the issue this evening. At the time of making the decision to go above ground, Metrolinx determined that they would save hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, with that particular change. And I'd argue that the savings that Metrolinx realized by going above ground should be used to reduce problems that the residents are facing, at least part of those savings. People should be aware that Metrolinx is a provincial agency. It's charged with building and operating new transit. It answers to the Minister of Transportation. It doesn't answer to the city, and it doesn't answer to the legislature. When the Ontario line was proposed, the current government put in legislation that gave it an override on city regulations. And so many things that are occurring, like operating outside common working hours that would not be allowed for other construction projects, are something that are common with Metrolinx operations. Councillor Fletcher and the city have been strong allies of the affected communities, but their power is limited. Notwithstanding that, the councillor was a powerful force in getting action on the severe construction dust problem at Eaton and Danforth. Trustee Ehrhardt has been central to supporting the school community at Pape School, dealing with the disruption that they've had on their hands. The recent tragedy has galvanized public feeling. My hope is that Metrolinx will revise their overall approach and take a more proactive stance to identify and address problems in advance. It's clear that road safety is a big issue. We'll see what comes out tonight, but at the very least, we need to see a big truck and road safety plan come out of these discussions with real resources to implement it. Now, I understand Metrolinx has taken steps following on the accident to address immediate problems, but my sense is that constituents, residents of the community will have more concerns and more things that they want put in place. I want to note as well that road safety issues are not limited to the Pape and Mortimer area, but are real issues in the vicinity of Pape School and down around Dundas and Logan. As construction ramps up, we can expect even more soil haulage on our main streets. We need to sort things out and have a plan in place for those changes. And again, we need Metrolinx to be more proactive. I know there are other issues that need to be addressed, and I would not be surprised if people raise the issue of rats and rat control this evening. I expect there will be other issues as well. My hope is that we will meet again in the next few months to see where we stand and what's been put in place. And with that, I turn things back to Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. And by the way, congratulations on your recent election. I don't even think it's been a week, so you're back in the saddle very quickly. Thank you for being here tonight and joining Sarah and I again for one of these. I also just
Thanks,
want
Paula.
I will introduce everybody in a minute, but I want to thank Metrolinx very much for joining tonight, and GIP contractor for joining tonight. It's going to be a very important conversation. This is a complicated project. I think we can all agree on that. It's very difficult to build new transit in a very dense community, and the PAPE corridor is turning into one of those places with a lot of construction, a lot of hauling, and needs some very, very special attention. And this is a long project. I think we'll hear it's at least 5 years, and we're just kind of at the front end of it. And it is 5 kilometers through Toronto Danforth. So Peter, I agree in having a heavy truck plan, a haul plan that everybody signed off on and understands what that looks like. I also just want to thank community members who've been so active since a while. Kat on Mortimer, she's flagged Mortimer a long time ago. Rob for jumping on getting improvements on PAPE immediately after that terrible accident, and to Francis for doing a site walk with me and our staff 10 days ago, which was very instructive. I also just want to let everybody know that we'll use the Q&A tonight, not the chat, to answer any of the questions, and we have a lot of people here that are able to answer all of your questions. And anybody, as Peter said, our thoughts and hearts go out to the resident who was hit by the truck. And if any of you would like to send a message to her, you can do that in the Q&A, and I will make sure that that's sent in and over to her and her family. So thanks very much. Sara, I'll just turn that over to you for your remarks.
Thank you very much. And thanks very much for everyone who has joined tonight for this important conversation, and to our community for continued advocacy for safety throughout the construction that we're experiencing as a community. A lot has already been said, and so I will emphasize that as a representative representing our community for public schools and an order of government that concerns itself with children, I do want to put that into this conversation, is that the increased activities that we have been seeing, and that my understanding is that we will be continuing to experience, have to be looked at by those that are making the plans from the lens of the children who move around this community all hours of the day, the children and families. And so the discussion that we're having tonight, I know, is very focused on the incidents that have taken place, this tragedy, but I want to make sure that this doesn't happen anywhere in our broad community again. And so when we're asking, and the advocacy that we're seeing for one crossing guard, I know we need to see across the community wherever these trucks are going to be. And so it's with that lens that I'm listening tonight, and that I'm seeking to support our community in our efforts for safety. And so thanks very much.
Thank you, Sara. And now I'm very happy to turn this over to Michael Hodge, Executive Vice President, Ontario Line. Michael Hodge is from Metrolinx. Please, Michael. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Councillor. My name is Michael Hodge, and I am the EVP for Ontario Line. So I am responsible for overseeing the planning and the construction of the entire Ontario Line project. I do thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and MPP Tabuns, and Trustee Ehrhardt for inviting me to be here tonight and to speak and to listen to the community for this important discussion. I'm also joined by 2 of my colleagues from Metrolinx, Kelly Hagan, our Vice President of Community Engagement, and Martin Gallagher, our Chief Operating and Safety Officer for Metrolinx. And as the councillor indicated, we also have John Pontarolo, who is the Chief Operating Officer for GIP, and Juan Montiel, our Project Manager from GIP, They are responsible for the work sites that we currently have at Pape and Danforth and at Pape and Salmon. The accident that occurred on February 6th is on the top of each of our minds, and I'm sure on all of our thoughts are with that individual and their loved ones tonight. I appreciate being able to be here, to hear from the community, to answer questions, to give you an update on some of the immediate actions that we've taken to strengthen safety in this area. And as we continue to build Ontario Line, we know that safety must come first. And I want to ensure that we're doing all that we can to safeguard the well-being of this community. So thank you again for having me here tonight. Back to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Michael, and for bringing your team tonight. And I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that you'll be able to answer. I'll just quickly introduce some of the city team tonight. Derek Toigo is here. He's the Executive Director, Transit Expansion. Anthony Irving is here. He's the Manager in Transit Expansion. Navi Tathgar is here, and he is a Manager of Transportation in Transit Expansion. We also have Gary Pappas here from the TTC, because there are a number of folks who've indicated once the construction starts further north, what's that going to mean for all the TTC stops? So that's both at Danforth and all the way up Pape, because it's a pretty major route. Also, just thank my team here, Nick Valverde and Tamara Dhanaraja, because they are running the scene while it's being hosted by Peter and Sara and myself. These are two experts that are very, very good at the Zoom, which we all learned how to do in the pandemic. We're just going to ask a few questions just to find out who's here tonight and where you come from, what area, kind of where do you live? Are you from Pape Mortimer Salmon, Pape Cosburn, Pape Riverdale, where the portal is going to be for the subway, somewhere else around the Ontario line? You might live in Toronto Danforth, but you're not near the Ontario line. Or you're joining us from outside, and as we always say, welcome. We're happy to have you with us if you're not from our. We'll just let everybody answer that. And there's a second poll question you can answer at the same time. Just really, how often do you or your family use Pape between Danforth and Cosburn? Every day, several times a week, once a week. This is just very helpful, and I think it's helpful for everyone who's going to be answering the questions just to know who is here tonight, because a lot, as I'm watching this go, good number, almost half of you who are here tonight use Pape Avenue between Danforth and Cosburn every day. So very, very familiar, and obviously very concerned, and want to make sure that as this project proceeds, that it is at the highest safety level possible. So I think we'll almost be ready to end that poll. Can end the poll now and share the results. Here you go. You can see that Pape and Mortimer Salmon, 30%, Pape and Cosburn, 21%, Pape and Riverdale, 21%, around the Ontario line, but not those particular areas. And then outside of Toronto Danforth, 7%. Welcome to you all. That's who's with us. And then again, we'll just see how often people use this. 44% of you here tonight use that corridor there every day, several times a week, 28% once a week. So really and truly, you are the folks that are on the ground watching what's happening at this particular area. So thank you so much for telling us about yourself. And now we'll just move on to a very quick presentation. And as we heard, and you said, Michael, earlier, that February the 6th, there was this terrible accident by a subcontractor that made a right turn. And these were life-altering injuries. As we know, the police are still investigating. There are haul routes, and one of you has asked, what are those haul routes? We're coming to that, and you can ask questions about that later. And I think, Michael, you're able to answer all those haul route questions as we get to them. Unfortunately, the haul route did not include Mortimer, so this was a turn that was a very, very unfortunate. That driver did not cover that because it wasn't covering the haul route. And then there was a second incident that was seen where there was a subcontractor also turning onto Mortimer. and identical turn there. Nobody was hurt, but again, this is not they're not hauling soils, but it is a very, very, very large truck, and that was caught on video. There have been some changes that Metrolinx undertook very quickly, and I'll let you address those a little more in depth, Michael. But you can read them here. The subcontractors, there's been consequences. There is now a traffic agent. There'll be a permanent crossing guard. And I want to say that at Pape and Riverdale, you've been very on the ball as far as getting the crossing guards necessary for that utility change. There are traffic control people and spotters that you've put out there. We did a site visit, as I mentioned earlier. There were some issues, and I think probably just cleanliness and safety is on everybody's mind a little more. And there's been no heavy trucks on Mortimer. I'll show you a picture of those. We have had requests to install more GPS and to ensure that all those stops that the TTC has on, and the bus stops and people queuing, that will be safe with the construction going on. This was from the site visit, and that is the north side of Salmon across from the construction site. It is to be the contractor is to keep that clear. It wasn't clear. Our staff from the city had to remind them. And then a large truck staging on that residential street. That is a picture of that one. I think it was the GFL truck making the corner. And Michael, you can tell us how you've dealt with that. And there are the new signs that have been put up by GIP, I think just today, saying no trucks on Mortimer, no trucks on Torrance. So what I'm going to do now is just turn that back over to you, Michael, to comment on all of the steps that you've taken from Metrolinx immediately after this terrible accident, and then seeing that there's large trucks on some of these streets. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I think right from the outset after the accident, we've worked closely with GIP and also with the city on confirming again the haul routes, and more broadly speaking, all truck routes, because we're not just talking about haul routes, which involve dump trucks, but we're talking now about all truck routes, including concrete mixers and the trucks that are supplying to the sites, primarily rebar, in addition to concrete. So we've mapped out what those routes are. I will ask John to speak in a little more detail about how those routes are being communicated to all of the drivers of those trucks, but we have confirmed each of the haul routes that are appropriate. And that's been done working with the city, because the city often has a perspective that we don't in terms of appropriate routing, which routes can be used at night versus daytime only. Some routes or some loads are oversized, and those need to be limited to certain routes. So it's very much something that we need to work with the city on. But then there's a role that our contractors play in terms of how that gets communicated down to subcontractors and suppliers. So John, can I call on you to speak a little bit about how your company is working with each of your vendors and suppliers on communicating the route, and then what you're doing to enforce the adherence to those routes?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Councillor Fletcher and MPP Tabuns and Trustee Sara Ehrhardt for allowing us to join the session. And thanks to all the community members for joining. Of course, at the Green Infrastructure Partners GIP, we take safety very, very seriously. Our heartfelt warmth goes out to the individual and hope for a full and quick recovery as well. And like Michael was noting, we work very closely with Metrolinx and the City of Toronto in the haul routes and identifying the haul routes. We send mass communication out to all of our vendors that are required to be part of that job site to make sure that they know what the haul routes are before the project even starts. And then, of course, right after the incident happened, we resent out those communications to over 150 suppliers and vendors to ensure that they abide by the haul routes and the laws and regulations across all the city streets, and ourselves implemented increased safety protocols to ensure the trucks and vehicles that are accessing our site and leaving our site are following the regulations. Immediately after the second incident on February 27th, We put our own people on staff right at the corner there of Pape and Mortar to make sure that any trucks going through would follow the appropriate haul route. Of course, I wish we could put our heads in the minds of the truck drivers on those days when they're crossing those intersections, but we can't. But what we can do is control what we can control. And so we made it very clear in distribution, another distribution to all of our vendors, that any driver who fails to utilize the approved trucking route will no longer be available, no longer be allowed to come on our project and will be removed. And any vendor, any company that has two infractions will also be removed from participating in the project at the PAPE station project. Of course, we also then recommunicated to all those vendors after that second incident as well, and as well ensures when the vehicles come to our site, enter our site, and leave our site, we're communicating again with them before they leave the site what the approved haul road is, and making sure that they get truck routing maps for depending on what products and what they're what they're dealing with. And the incident most recently, like Councillor Fletcher on Salmon Avenue, the team immediately identified the issue, got it cleaned up, of course, with identifying it from the city, and as well as subcontractor that was using that as a staging area. We have dealt with accordingly within the means that we've talked about here. And then on the signage that just went up in the last couple of days, we sat with the City of Toronto and Metrolinx and identified the needs for those signages to be put in place immediately, and did everything we could with our vendors to make sure, typically what could take, sometimes days of turnaround, we got it done in less than 12 hours, understanding the importance of safety. And we're open to listen to all requests and learn, and obviously put in place the controls we can to make this project and all projects as safe as possible. That's a key thing from our company. Our safety is our number one priority value, making sure all of our employees and our communities stay safe. And so those are key things for us we've put in place. And we continue to work very closely with Metrolinx to make sure we can keep the safety on our streets and give the transit projects that the province well needs and deserves as well.
Thank you. There is just a question here from Mary. Does the subcontractor still work for Metrolinx? That is one of the questions from one of the neighbors.
Any subcontractor that has had more than two or more infractions will no longer be working on this project. I can't speak for other projects, but for the project that we're involved with.
Okay, I had understood that particular contractor was no longer working on the site.
The one from February 6th, absolutely
Yes.
yes. I thought you meant the last one from the salmon pitcher. Sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
No, I meant that.
That vendor is definitely no longer working for GIP.
Okay. Thank you very much. And there's one here, if I can, that has to do with any penalties. I think you've established that their penalties will be off the job. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
After two.
Individual driver would be one incident, and for vendors, it's two infractions.
So be clear, individual driver, you're gone. Vendor, two of those, and you're gone. That's how you're moving from here on in. Is that
correct?
Michael, do you just want to confirm that too?
Yes. Yes. No, that's absolutely the case. With the drivers, it's an absolute zero tolerance policy.
Thank you. There is a question just about Hopedale and Hopedale and Stanhope. They're not, we're going to see the haulage routes, and maybe we can also look at what's happening up there. Could you tell us if Woody Crest is a night route? Because people are seeing a lot of trucks. They're seeing trucks on Browning, they're seeing staging on Floyd, and they're seeing Woody Crest as a night route. And I'm wondering if those are Metrolinx trucks or those are, I'll just call them Ontario Line trucks, because you don't own trucks, but the Ontario Line, they're working for the Ontario Line.
So none of those streets that you've just mentioned are on any of our haul routes or truck routes. So none of our vehicles of any contractor should be using any of those streets. So with further information, we can certainly trace back and see if they are working for us. But I will say they are absolutely not permitted to be using those streets. They're not part of any haul routes that we've worked on.
And maybe Kelly, I know that you have a system where people can send an email right away and they can get an answer back. And perhaps we could post that or let everybody know what that. Can you tell us how that works for people that are wondering
Yeah.
about those
I will
trucks?
absolutely post that information in the chat, but that is my team. Not only do we have community offices where you can pop into and see my staff, but we do have a phone number and an email. There's a 24-hour number. But if you see something or there's an infraction or you've got questions, if you reach out to us, we're going to respond to you immediately and take action and engage with Mike's team, with our contractor, and understand what's happening and what's going on. So I'll put that contact information in the Q&A so everybody can see it.
Kelly, after we always send the video out to everybody who attended or thought they might attend, and we'll make that address very clear at the top for everyone because there's a lot of people suggesting that your vehicles, Metrolinx Ontario Line vehicles, are on their streets on Browning and on Floyd and a few other places. So I'm hearing that that's not the case, but if people are seeing those and there's a name on the truck, then that would be the way to check with you, correct?
That is correct.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have quite, we'll just carry on now. Thank you for that. This is the overnight work that started at Pape and Mortimer. That differences between sleeping and is it safe during the day? So who would like to start on that one? Do you want to do that, Michael, or
Sure. Yeah, Councillor, I'm happy to speak to the work and why we're doing it, and then I know maybe Navi can also speak to some of the limitations that we have. But these are geotechnical investigations that we are doing related to the tunneling work that will follow in a couple of years. So this is not part of GIP's work, but this is one of our other contractors who are doing geotechnical, or what is essentially drilling into the soil using very long but small drill bits into the soil to test the soil conditions. And we work with the city as we always do when we need to close a lane so that the work can be done safely. And the city obviously has authority on which lanes can be closed and when they can be closed and under which conditions they are closed. They stipulate the signage that's required, flag persons that are needed, and or paid duty officers. And in this case, the work was selected to be performed at night rather than closing the lane during the day. And so obviously those are the conditions of the permit that we have. We were scheduled to do the drilling work last night, but because of the rain and wet weather conditions, we did call the work off. And since then, we will go back to the city just to confirm the conditions around the lane closure. And as you said, Councillor, finding the right balance between working overnight, which comes with noise and disruption to the community, versus doing it during the daytime, but increases the lane closures to traffic, which includes TTC bus routes.
Thanks very much for that. Navi or Derek, did you want to comment on the lane closure issue versus nighttime work?
Yeah, definitely, Councillor. So as I'll draw everybody's attention to this graphic on the left side, you see that both the eastbound lanes will be taken over to perform this work, and the work will be carried out in the vicinity of this intersection, which is a very busy intersection. And as you can imagine, that just in light of the recent incident that happened, being abundantly cautious and making sure that it is safe for the pedestrians, including the residents and school-going children, as well as it is also less disruptive for the through movements here in this area. So we prefer that this work be carried out during the nighttime hours. Now, working with Metrolinx, we're going to be requesting the contractor, if possible, to start earlier than 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. So it is even less disruptive in terms of the noise and all the noisy work. If that can be performed in the early hours of the night rather than in the late hours of night. I think that's something that we're going to be exploring working with them. And safety, again, is paramount. And as Michael pointed out, we're going to be asking them to deploy a paid duty officer here, directing the traffic and pedestrians around this work zone, as well as flag persons assisting that paid duty officer and the construction-related traffic in the area. Councillor, that's my input on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Remind you that, yes, there's lots of questions and we're going to go to those, and you may have suggestions. I do see some suggestions. And once we talk about the haul routes, we'll go to some of those. We'll just move to those haul routes because everybody wants to know exactly what they are. And we're just going to move to the haul routes now. So you can see those. And there they are. Michael, did you want to take the haul routes and explain those, please?
Yes, I'm happy to. These are on the left and on the right are the haul routes, respectively, for Pape Salmon on the left, and the green dot marks the construction site. And on the right-hand side, the larger Pape and Danforth construction site. In both cases, these are haul routes for dump trucks that are leaving the site, so going northbound on Pape. It's in that darker purple color, and the haul route is north on Pape up to O'Connor with a right-hand turn on O'Connor and traveling eastbound up to Don Mills Road and then onto the Don Valley Parkway. And then in return, via, again, Don Mills Road off the DVP, south on Don Lands and over to Danforth, and then either going to the Pape Danforth site or up to Salmon. So that route is very straightforward. It sticks to main roads, and those are the haul routes for haulage or dump trucks. Since the accident happened, and Councillor, as you know, these routes were presented to City Council over the summer and were part of a staff report that went to Council. But since the accident, as I said, we've worked with the city to confirm this route, but also look at all other truck routes because we, as I said, we do have concrete mixers and rebar supply. Those are the main two types of other deliveries that we're concerned about. Those routes aren't shown on here. Concrete mix in particular comes from the concrete campus located in the Portlands at Lakeshore and Leslie. And so we do need specific routes to bring that concrete supply up from the Portlands to our two sites. But again, those have been carefully mapped out with the city. Roughly, they follow Leslie, Jones, Danforth, Pape. And as needed, also via the Don Valley Parkway and Lakeshore Boulevard.
Thanks, thanks, Michael. There was a question about the concrete trucks from Nick earlier. So those are related to Metrolinx, and I guess, will those be under the same restrictions as any of the other haulers?
So yeah, I'm not sure if those are working for Ontario Line. Certainly, that is not the prescribed route for concrete mix. As the one that I just described. So anything traveling eastbound on Riverdale, I would certainly want to take away and look at that and see if they are ours. As you know, we have other work sites at Cosburn and up at Minton, as well as at Riverdale and Pape. So we have sites up and down the length of Pape in your ward. So I will definitely take that away and look into that because that's not the prescribed route for concrete mix supply, inbound nor outbound.
And how are they compensated by the haulers, Michael? Is it by the load, by the hour? Are they incentivized? That's, I think, an important question you've got here.
I will pass this over to John or Juan, who will be more familiar with that specific level of trade or vendor information.
Sorry, which was the question you're referring to? I'm sorry, I apologize. My video is not working. I've been trying to get it fixed here, but
sorry, John,
something
you're
happened.
Blank screen at the moment, but it really has to do with the compensation. Is it by the load? How do you compensate the haulers? What's your method?
For the ones with the excavation, the dump trucks, those vendors are typically paid by the hour of work. For other vendors, like the other vehicle you saw, those are just subcontract where they're cleaning, or if they're the one that you saw on Salmon there, they were staged there to unload products. That would be part of one of the subcontractors' vehicles. But the dump trucks you see that was involved in the first incident are majority of the time paid by the hour.
So they're just on an hourly rate, there's no incentive to carry more soils, or I think
Just
that's,
to what, sorry?
there's no incentive to go quickly, to get things quickly to wherever you're taking them. And I guess the other question is,
No.
there's no incentive. Where are all the soils going? I think everybody wants to know where, because there's a lot of cubic meters of soil.
I wouldn't know the exact area location. Those would obviously all be prescribed either as part of the contract, or we would have to identify them. Juan, do you know where the excavated soils for our project are being?
Yes, depending on the characteristics of the soils, we are using approved disposal facilities. Mostly, if there is contaminated soil or is clean soil as depending of our sample analysis, we use the different disposal facilities. But we are using based on this characterization, the places varies depending on that, as well as to any other conditions. But yes, there are always approved disposal facilities across the city.
Outside of the city, probably, right?
Yes, mostly yes.
So Sarah, that haul route shows coming back down Dawnlands and then back up. Is that correct? Inbound and outbound, Michael, for those PAPE? Inbound, outbound, and the work zone for the haul routes?
The maps that are on the screen right now, those are the haul routes. For the trucks leaving the site, it's the dark purple, and then the empty trucks coming in to the site are the lighter purple color. So south on Dawnlands, and then a westbound on Danforth.
There's quite a few questions and requests to not only tonight, but to be able to track. Is there any ability, or I think people really would like to know there's GPS on these, on the haul trucks or the dump trucks that are carrying this amount of soil, and that they're on the haul routes, that they're going the right speed, that they're not diverting. Is that something that can be considered here?
So it is something that Metrolinx has been talking about and looking at. I'll tell you, it is not a straightforward answer. A lot of the larger companies and vendors, suppliers already do use GPS, and we're aware of some of those. Many of the smaller vendors don't. And it's something we're absolutely looking at in terms of how we help manage haulage and help manage trucks, especially in neighborhoods like Pape and Danforth and up to Pape and O'Connor and along Dawnlands. But it's not something I can say today that we have GPS on every single one of our trucks. We simply do not have that. But it's something we're looking at closely.
It's something I think that would be much appreciated. Then I know we're putting GPS on all of our parks vehicles, on all of our forestry vehicles, know where they are, how fast they're going, and everything else. So it's a modern thing to do. The haul routes, there are people that are interested in the other haul routes, the Minton Stanhope haul route, which hasn't been identified here. There's a lot of spoils coming there. If you could just address how that's working and what should people do if they don't feel it's working very well.
So if not working well, absolutely contact us at Metrolinx. If that's what you're comfortable doing. I know Councillor people often go through you as well, and we're happy to receive inquiries from your office or from the MPP's office as well. But if things aren't going well, I would always request that you please be in touch with us, and Kelly will provide that information. either through email or through phone number. The Minton, as I said, Minton is just one of our other sites on PAPE, but in all cases, all truck routes, all haulage has to be done on roads that permit trucks. And when I hear road names like Floyd, Browning, Woody Crest, those roads do not permit trucks at any time. And so all of our trucks need to be following routes that do allow trucks per municipal bylaw through the municipal code. And that is simply put, that is where trucks are allowed to be, is on truck routes and roads that allow trucks. So if there are instances of trucks operating on residential streets, by all means contact us, and we're happy to look into that and happy to trace it back to any number of our contractors.
Yeah, thank you. I think that you could also contact MPP Tabuns province with any of those what we'll call infractions. And it's important to be able to identify, because somebody said there was a GFL truck going the wrong way on Logan. So I'm assuming that many of these people coming in the trucks they don't live in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of one-way streets. It's quite complicated, dense, small streets. And I think, Michael, thank you. Just get that information over as quickly as possible. So would that be considered an infraction? I think that's what I think people want to know, what an infraction is here.
I'm far from an expert on the Highway Traffic Act.
I meant for you. When Metrolink says
for
that
us.
infraction
Yeah, no,
for that
absolutely,
driver or for that
it is.
hauler.
So, yeah. So as we've heard tonight with GIP as just one of our contractors, there is a policy in place for how to address operators of vehicles, as well as the firms that own those vehicles, and what happens when they go off route. And, and that's specifically what we've done with GIP, and it's something we're rolling out with all of our contracts. Again, especially on PAPE, where we have multiple sites, multiple contractors in what is a very heavily residential and mixed neighborhood from top to bottom. So infractions are dealt with similarly.
Councillor, you made the point about the truck travelling in the wrong direction, and I would just like to say a couple of things just related to that, if that's okay.
Yes, please jump in.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we're facing in putting together effective safety controls, and certainly the GPS and the technology points are excellent points, is that a lot of the controls that we're talking about are administrative in nature, and administrative controls have more failure points than engineering controls. And that's one of the issues that we need to solve. For example, haulage routes, briefings, training, signage, they're all good things, but they rely on people complying and doing the right things every time correctly, to remember to do them correctly, not to have a lapse, not to make a mistake, not to choose something different to do. That's one of the challenges we have in ensuring that people are doing the right things, of course, but the reliance on human factors creates vulnerability and weaknesses. People forget, people are distracted. They press button A instead of button B, even though they were trained to press button B. Sometimes, and a lot of the time, it's not deliberate or intentional, and that's not trying to excuse any mistakes. It's a reality of human factors. So our plans require more resilience, and that's what we're working on, to layer these plans so that we have more and more administrative controls and more crossing guards and more technology so that we can improve the safety.
Yeah. Paula, do you mind if I jump in here for a moment?
No, everybody, go for it. Thank you.
Okay. There's an awful lot of substantial questions tonight, and I hope we can get through a fair number of them. But one of the things that was striking to me that was raised in the questions was whether or not there is a cross-reference between different Metrolinx projects and subcontractors. So you may have a hauling contractor working at the Pape and Danforth site who acts in a way that causes them to be removed. Are they then blocked from other Metrolinx contracts, so that we don't have just a situation where we have a rotation of musical chairs of haulage contractors who are a problem just simply going on to another site? And this is a question that came up from a number of people. Why is it that a subcontractor, a hauling contractor, is given 2 infractions before they're cut off contracts? And I would like to hear your logic, because I think for a lot of people, that's contrary to a sense of a zero tolerance policy on approaching things in a way that's not safe. And I leave it, Kelly, Michael, to you to determine who's the best person to answer that.
Sarah, I can answer the first part of the question. In fact,
Excellent.
perhaps I'll hand it over to one of our contractor colleagues to handle the second part. The first part of the question was related to whether we track contractors and workers who may migrate from one site to another after an infraction. And yes, we certainly do. From the 1st February incident, one of the first things we did is to check to see if we have that operator working on any of our other projects. We obviously have a huge amount of projects across the GTHA, not just in the city core, but across the whole GO expansion, like rail transit, subway extension projects, as well as the Ontario line. So we checked and we found out that actually that contractor does appear somewhere else on one of our GO expansion projects, and we banned them from that project also. We also do exactly the same with individuals, particularly working on projects, that are actually more related to rail projects. We have a program where everybody has identification cards, and we track them from project to project, and we withdraw their credentials to access sites if they've had an infraction.
Thank you for that answer. Michael, Kelly, who can speak to this question of why a contractor is given 2 infractions before they're told that they can't continue to work for Metrolinx?
John, do you want to answer that?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, to be clear, the individual, of course, it is the zero tolerance in terms of the individual if they're caught not following the proper haul routes. In terms of the vendors, obviously working closely with Metrolinx, the 2 infractions we think is very, very strict. In terms of the vendor, many of these vendors own, 10, 15, maybe 20 dump trucks or other vehicles, and are contracted throughout the project. And so those were rules we thought we put in place that made sense. Obviously, there's always things we can refresh and look at, but on an individual basis, I think it was said well in terms of the administrative controls put in place, but we can't change the individual making that decision on that day to turn right or go straight or turn left. And so making sure that the zero tolerance is within the individual so they know they can't break those rules. Even though all of our vendors go through a variety of subcontractor safety protocols and checks and claims, they won't even be able to work for us if they don't pass those certain requirements. And so they all coming in with a high level standard of safety. And so we thought from a vendor perspective, the 2 infractions would be fair to the vendor, as well ensuring that we can continue to move the project forward. So.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to follow up on the whole question of the demolition and excavation work that's going to happen at Pape and Cosburn.
Can we just do the haul routes for the other 2 zones first, Peter, if you
Sure.
don't mind?
Paula,
Because
I'm happy to give it back to you on that.
And then you'll move right to there, because we do have a question. There is the haul route for all the tunneling that will take place in the Riverdale Plaza, and there's hundreds of thousands of spoils coming out of their cubic meters. So what I think everybody wants to know what's going to happen on that one. And the second one will be the East Harbor, which is starting shortly for the transit that will be there at East Harbor, and what the route's going to be there. So Michael, could you or somebody from your team answer that one, please?
Yeah. So on the tunneling, we're still, a little while off before we begin the actual spoil removal through the act of the tunneling. So we are still working on what those haul routes are. They will, again, absolutely be limited to only those roads that allow trucks. At this point, the most likely route would be to leave Riverdale Plaza, which is where the tunnel boring machines will be staged and will begin the tunneling. And that's where the spoils will be removed, is into that plaza site. And so at this point, the most logical route would be to leave the plaza onto Carlaw Avenue and then south down to Lakeshore. But we are still working on that. And that's a good example of something that we need to work with the city on to confirm the most appropriate and most safe routes. And you're right, that is going to be a tremendous amount of haulage. And so much work needs to be put into that by us and my team as we confirm routes and confirm volumes. And it's a rather large piece of work that we will be working with the city staff on. And we will certainly be coming back to the community when we have more detail around that.
It's the eyes and ears of any project to.
Absolutely. East Harbour, that is an Ontario Line station. It's not a contract that I manage, but obviously given the proximity to Eastern Avenue, that will be the primary route from Eastern. And again, all trucks have to follow routes that allow trucks to be driven on them. So from Eastern, there are some pretty logical routes to make it down to Lakeshore and onto the Gardner or onto the Don Valley Parkway. And so that roughly, without being able to provide specific detail, that would be the logical routing.
Yeah, Councillor, it's Derek from Transit Expansion. So both of these stations, as Michael has indicated, the Gerrard Portal, we've started the initial meetings with Metrolinx on kind of where there hasn't been a haul route defined yet. And then similarly with East Harbour, as Michael mentioned, this project is going to be commencing major construction in the coming months. And prior to that, there's going to be a haul route defined for where all that haulage will be transported. So we will be working, as Michael said, very closely with Metrolinx on both of these projects. And the community, obviously.
Paula, were you going to follow up on that?
We just had a little technical difficulty here.
Okay.
Now I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry.
I can see the technical support just leaving the screen.
The technical support, we're right here. Don't know what happened there, but there you go. So now we will move to that section of the demolition, what's going to happen further north. Go ahead, Peter. You want to know about that?
Well, just following up on the questions that have been placed in the chat. And again, there's an awful lot of substantial material here. But Pape and Cosburn, as I understand it from earlier comments, will be operating with a different crew as opposed to the crew that's doing Pape and Salmon and Pape and Danforth. Michael, you're shaking your head, so I take that as an affirmation. I assume that Metrolinx is going to be sitting down with those people, talking about the safety issues that we've encountered and the approaches you've taken. But can you tell us what safety issues you've identified in the Pape Cosburn area and how you intend to address those in the months to come?
Certainly. With all demolition work, and I'll add that that particular part of the project is called the Pape Tunnel and Underground Stations Contract.
Yeah.
And that team has also started demolition at Bain. So at Pape and Bain, they've recently mobilized to that site for demolition. And then there will be demolition moving further up to Cosburn. With all demolition, one of the things from a community perspective is dust. And so we always look for dust suppression and dust control when we do demolition. That often includes keeping the materials wet so that the dust is suppressed. Truck traffic, again, will be a concern. So instituting haul routes, which we have done at Pape, and making sure that traffic controls are in place to guide machinery and equipment into the site and out of the site. So again, using signage, traffic cones, paid duty officers and flag persons wherever needed. Those are, trucks and dust. Noise, obviously, is another concern. With building demolition, there's always a concern around hazardous materials. Most commonly in these types of buildings, we will find asbestos and lead paint, and lead solder and plumbing. And so those hazardous materials are carefully investigated and surveyed before work begins. Materials are sampled and sent to laboratories, tested, and then based on those results, those hazardous materials have to be abated, which means carefully contained and removed so as not to become airborne, primarily to not affect the people doing the work, but also, of course, not to go into the air, into the community at large. So hazardous material abatement is key. Once those materials are removed, then the main demolition work begins, and that's where we have dust and noise and trucks, I think, are the three biggest hazards. And as I said, with Bain, we've already done all of that work, and we did sit down, and we had a quite lengthy meeting with the contractor doing that work to review the accident that happened on February 6th and the severity of what can happen when mistakes are made. And we reviewed protocols, we reviewed haul routes, and instituted similar policies that we have with GIP at Pape and Danforth, Pape and Salmon.
Michael, I appreciate the general sketch you've given us. Would it be possible to have within the next month a more detailed written plan? And I'll say in particular, because we have Westwood School, we have Chester School, we have an awful lot of kids in that area. Can you give us, within a month, a sense of where crossing guards will be deployed to maximize the safety for the kids who are going to and coming from school on a regular basis?
No, absolutely. And that is something we typically share with the community in our construction liaison committee meetings. There is one established for Pape Danforth, Pape Salmon, and that is exactly the type of plan and information that we would bring to the CLC meetings. And I think if the timing works out, about a month sounds right.
That would be great.
Just, Michael, those are very small meetings because this is such a safety issue now, and it's quite complicated. I think we would agree Pape is the whole of Pape is basically under construction and haul route. Is there some way that those meetings could be open to more people? When we have a large construction, like let's say Queen and Coxwell, then it's a construction liaison committee. People can come and go from that. They're getting information. They're signed up to get that information specifically about these issues, and particularly safety issues. Is that something you could consider in expanding that, or having more, I'll call it more fluid in and out?
Yeah, Councillor, I'm happy to take that one. I mean, absolutely. The idea here isn't to limit who gets to come or who gets to hear information. There is definitely a need, as explained here in this meeting tonight, that we need to do more of these open sessions up the entire corridor of Pape. So I will take that away, work with the team, and figure out how we make that happen. CLCs are one way. We can open those up to the extent we can, but it might be better that we just actually plan and host several safety-focused conversations all the way up the corridor along Pape, so that we are able to reach. I mean, I have a philosophy of trying to do engagement in multiple channels and in multiple ways, because everybody is able to then join and take the information how they are able to receive it. So absolutely something that I'm happy to take away. We'll work with the team, and we'll definitely reach out to the neighborhood for more of these sessions.
I know that you were at the Pape School, that the parents all came out, and Metrolinx, you and some of your staff came out and answered all those questions very directly. You didn't need to be meeting every 2 weeks, but it was a pretty good information session and planning session. Something like that, I think, would be very good, because there are, as you can see, a lot of questions here in the chat, and it's also very helpful for you to know what's happening, because these are your eyes on the street. So Someone says there's 3 trucks been lined up at Pape and Gowan, just waiting to load. And I think it's frustrating if people cannot let you know that and get some answers quickly. I'm sure you understand that. And I think you're frozen, Kelly. You're having a problem here too. Michael, do you want to grab that then? Kelly's frozen. Her screen is frozen.
Yeah, certainly. I think we will open up. Sorry, Councillor. I think it was about CLCs and meetings.
It's about more than just, a member of a CLC. It's just on this PAPE, it's very clear that getting ready to tunnel and getting ready for stations it's a massive amount of work that's going on PAPE. And a lot of trucks, there's a lot of schools, there's just so much going on. And now the demolition of 2 whole blocks. So probably needs more get the questions answered, give you information of what people are actually seeing on the ground. If that's something that you can do, or that, Peter, I know you've hosted a number of those and invited Metrolinx. That's worked out very well too.
Yeah.
Of course, we are always happy to do that. And as you know, Councillor, I've also sat with Kelly at the front of the room and answered questions in a gymnasium or a large meeting room format. And we're happy to do that. I think different styles work for different people. So maybe an open house format is better for some people who just want to wander around and have smaller conversations rather than speaking in front of a large group. So we're happy to accommodate a diverse needs and different ways that people communicate best. But we're always happy to go out and speak with our communities.
Great. I think people want other people to know what they're hearing and that everybody has heard. The other question for demolition is about PAPE, the PAPE demolition, because you'll be taking down, I'm not sure you're taking the houses down. What happens to the 25 houses? Will those be demolished? What's the route out of there as compared to the route for the tunnels?
No plan to demolish the 25 houses that are located across and adjacent to Pape School. That is not the plan. The plan is to keep those houses in place during tunneling, but out of an abundance of caution, we've had to make sure those properties are vacant during tunneling, but there is not a plan to demolish those properties.
Thank you very much. And for I guess, Navi or Derek, with the demolition at Pape and Cosburn, and what can happen around the TTC stops? Those are very active. That's kind of downtown East York, right there, Pape and Cosburn, the 4 corners. What's going to happen and what can happen with all of the school kids that are crossing there, or people that are taking the TTC? Is there something that can be planned not to have bunching of people pushed off on the sidewalk? It's probably not going to be a very easy place to get by either. Is there planning for that yet?
Thanks, Councillor. So working with Metrolinx, first we need to understand, obviously, their demolition plan and the sort of the frequency of the construction traffic in and out of the site. And also, during the site visit that I had just recently with your office and yourself, we took note of those bus stops, and we're going to be working with TTC to understand, is there a relocation of those stops possible? Not too far from where they are currently, but nearby relocation where there could be a little bit more space, both for pedestrians and passengers, to safely navigate the roads, as well as, go in and out of those buses safely. So, Councillor, that is one of the items that I had noted during the site visit as well. So we're going to be working very closely with the TTC and Metrolinx to ensure that happens.
Peter, do you want to address the rat problem again, and what the plans it might be, so people can hear what the actual plan is that we discovered down at Pape and Danforth? So the demolition at Pape and Cosburn.
Well, I have to say, Paula, if you remember from the last meeting, one of the things we wanted was a more thorough and comprehensive plan for rat control. At least at Pape and Danforth, and those of you from Metrolinx can correct me if what I'm saying is inaccurate, but I understand that the contractor has a contract with a pest control firm for the perimeter of the site. And that we were told that Metrolinx will respond to people who say they have a rat problem and send pest control. We've had problems south of Pape and Danforth with people who've brought on pest control themselves and have had difficulty getting reimbursement from Metrolinx. What we asked for at that last meeting was a rat control plan, because we do need something that's comprehensive and ongoing and does not put residents in a situation where they have to pay for pest control and then wait an extended period, or have to deal with the contesting of the bill for rat control. So from Metrolinx, I'd like to hear, do you have a proposal for rat control going forward? Have I characterized your response correctly? If not, how exactly are you going to be dealing with the rat problem as it manifests itself up and down the length of the corridor?
So that is something Kelly and I do speak about frequently, and we are working on a plan that will address, I think, some of the concerns that you've raised, MPP Tabuns. I think within reason, there is certainly a proximity near our sites that I think deserves a little bit of support from us in terms of rodent control. And it can't be a hard line, because we know rodents move from demolition and from excavation activities. They're mobile populations. And so I think within reason, Kelly and I are looking at what is a suitable boundary outside of our project limits, where people are perhaps even automatically offered an opportunity for rodent control if that's something that they're interested in. I'm disappointed to hear that there's any sort of contestation of costs. If someone nearby a site has not been reimbursed, then we'd certainly want to be made aware of that, because we have lots of instances where we are sending out our own, through us, we're sending out a contractor. If our construction contractor isn't necessarily responsible for that, then we will take it on. So we have lots of good examples where we have done this. And so I wouldn't want to be hearing about someone who isn't being reimbursed. So please send that our way. I'm happy to make sure that gets addressed, because nobody should be out of pocket for that.
And Michael, I appreciate that. We have a comment here from Mary saying Metrolinx is only offering a single pest control visit. This doesn't address the ongoing issue of rat control. And this is the second time I've heard that. Is in fact Metrolinx only offering a one-time pest control visit?
Not that I'm aware of. I know of instances where we have done multiple visits and multiple treatments. And it's dependent on what the professional rodent control company advises. I mean, they have to be mindful of some of the methods they're using, and how much, if they're using poison, traps, how much, not poison traps, but if they're using poison bait stations, how much they're allowed to distribute and how much they're allowed to use. But it's not limited to one treatment. If the problem persists, then we will send someone out again.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And I'll just say to Mary, for your post, if you've been told you only get one visit, I'd ask you to get in touch with Metrolinx. Michael has just said that they will cover more than one. If you continue to have a problem, please contact my office and we'll try and follow up on that. I know, my goodness, the questions are coming in faster than I can cover them all. Could you speak very quickly, Michael, about the ongoing problem around Pape School? I gather that there are still problems with trucks going the wrong way, or trucks going down Langley on a street that's marked no trucks. There seems to be a lot of frustration there about the difficulty in actually applying controls that are consistent and effective.
Yeah, I was made aware of one instance of believe it was a dump truck operating on Langley, which is not permitted, and that road does not allow trucks. We are working right on Pape at Langley, where there is residential demolition happening by our Clearway contractor, and that was an example that was brought to our attention. There was a photograph taken of that, and we dealt with that contractor swiftly. And as we implement zero tolerance policies, the same types of things will apply in the future when that happens. I've not been made aware of any other instances of that since that one photograph that I was sent. But again, we need to know, and as you've described often tonight, the eyes and the ears of the community are the ones who see this and feel it the most. And we do ask that you let us know. And we welcome the photographs, we welcome the videotapes, because we will follow up and we will take action.
Can I say I appreciate the fact that the input of community is acted on, as you say, but one of the things that's frustrated residents, and I have to say I'm somewhat frustrated by, is that there's a general feeling that Metrolinx should have more eyes and ears on the street as well. The flooding on Eaton Avenue last year, because the grates to the sewers were blocked by dust, was a huge problem for the residents who had their basements flooded. And my feeling was that Metrolinx should have been inspecting and looking for those sorts of risks and dealing with them in advance. And having residents report on it, or the fire department who actually cleared the grates to stop the flooding, seems too late to me. So can you speak to this whole question of the level of supervision that you have for these projects so that the eyes and ears of the community are less necessary?
Sure. We do have staff who work for me, who are part of Metrolinx, who work on each of our sites and are present during work. And, their focus does tend to be inside the hoarding. And I think it's a question of paying attention to what's going on outside the hoarding, and not necessarily a matter of having more people out there, but it's broadening the attention and making sure that things outside the hoarding are also paid attention to, such as the cloth that we use to cover the grates to protect the storm sewers from dust and grit entering. If they get clogged, then there's a problem there. And so it's a matter of us being aware of what's going on outside the hoarding in the community. And all I can say there is it's a good reminder for me to instill that with my team, that their duty is not just inside the fence, but also on the outside. And that's something that we will look for as we continue to build.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Yes, your duty is outside the fence in a big way. And the frequent problems that are encountered by residents outside the fence when we look to Metrolinx to be defending the community are increasingly a problem. And something that I would hope that you allocate more resources to, because it really undermines the credibility of Metrolinx. We need the transit. Everybody knows that. Having good relationship with the community is critical, I think, to getting it done. And so having people outside the fence looking out for the interest of the residents is something that we very much need. Having editorialized for a moment, I just want to turn to the whole question of the work at Bain and Pape, because we've had a number of questions here, concern about a contractor blocking the street recently. This is a street that has no other exit, so caused a huge problem. People wanted to know what the haul route is going to be for the material taken from that site.
Yeah. As we have planned it, that street should never be blocked except when there is a truck movement into the site. So if that blockage or occupation of the road was longer than a temporary, instant, then that is a problem, because we don't have permission to close the road for anything more than bringing a truck with flag people into the site and then closing up the gates and then reopening the road. So anything more than a temporary, stoppage is not permitted, and I'm sorry to hear that. That's not how we should be working on that site, and it's certainly not as part of the plan. So that's regrettable, and something that I will certainly ask my team to keep an eye out for. That haul route leaving that site is not unlike the routes that are depicted for Pape Salmon, Pape Danforth. Trucks leaving that site need to travel northbound on Pape all the way up to O'Connor, right to travel eastbound on O'Connor to Don Mills Road, and then via the DVP to the appropriate site.
Thank you.
Because it is a smaller site, it won't be extensive haulage, but nevertheless, those are the routes that will be followed.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of ones that have popped up here in general? One is about the precondition surveys. And I know earlier down at the above ground part, joint corridor, we've had that conversation about kind of door to door. Now when the demolition's taking place and the work's happening at Salmon, is there a possibility to please do more outreach with that rather than flyer, but people that would be, as you've talked about the zone of impact for the rats, determining where that would be, the zone of impact for construction on people's homes. I don't know what you've identified as that zone of impact. And I know, Kelly, we've had this conversation before. So could you just update us on where you're at with that, please?
Yeah. Mike, do you want me to? I mean, I know
Sure.
that, yeah,
Sure,
around,
If everybody they might not know what that is. So do you want to just explain?
yeah, so a zone of influence is really just like the zone that the contractor looks at. Who are the homes and the businesses that are a certain meters away from the work site? Those people who find themselves in the zone of influence do need to have a pre-construction survey. The thing that we need to do better on is actually make sure that when the person comes to your door to offer that service, it's really clear who they are and what they're there to do. Those surveys do need to have some access to your homes. There's photos that are taken. It's really just a report that establishes what the conditions were before work began. So it's really important that when somebody comes to a door offering this service, that you're allowing them to give the space to do that work. But everybody within a zone of influence is required and has the ability to get a pre-construction survey.
So the outreach for that would rest with Metrolinx to make sure that everybody's getting that, right?
Correct. Yeah. And our contractors often will go out and go door to door to actually obtain those surveys.
The other thing that's mentioned is the office is currently at 810 Danforth, so that's at Pape and Danforth. And I know your office at Queen Street is very busy. People take good advantage of that.
Yes.
It does seem to me, and Michael, I'm going to ask you, because this, I think we're identifying this is a major construction area at Salmon and the demolition, and now there'll be the station that will go at Cosburn, and we also have up at Minton. Is there some way that Metrolinx could establish an office there, the same way as you have on Queen? That this is much a residential neighborhood, very much like Queen. It's not a business neighborhood. Is that something that you would consider? I think it would go a long way to help everybody during this long construction period.
Yeah, Councillor, I'm happy to take that away. I mean, obviously, whenever we're making considerations to open a community office, there's, the staffing it requires to keep it open. There's all of the work that we have to do to renovate, to pay leases, to do all these sorts of things. And in order to keep the offices staffed, it means there's no staff actually out knocking on doors and out in the community, maybe the way that they should be. So, but I'm going to take that away. I hear you. And whether it is an actual office or if it's something we're doing as pop-ups in the neighborhood on a regularly scheduled basis, it just becomes very challenging and problematic to staff and keep these offices open when we're also trying to have the staff out in the neighborhood. But I definitely hear where you're coming from, and we need to find ways to demonstrate to the public that we have regular spaces and hours available for people who live in that area to get to us easily.
Yeah, I could offer a suggestion that depends on how busy your 810 Danforth is. Your staff could go back. There'd be certain days for each site, because I've never seen this many questions. And Peter, you've been on a number, but very specific. I've seen this has happened. It's very specific. And I think it will only get more as you, not we, you're doing more of this work. So I strongly encourage you to have that safety valve for people that really can get problems sorted out. And these are real safety issues up and down the street. Contractor parking, that was always one that is on everybody's mind. And I think we'd hoped that you'd use that lot at Gamble for the contractor parking, at least to be able to park there. Up at Stanhope, they're indicating that many of the folks that are coming to work on that site are parking on the residential streets. I know you worked that out for the above ground where people are parking down on Eastern and coming up. Have you given any thought to that? What might your solution be to not swamping the neighborhood with the contractors that are on site parking on the streets?
It's a real challenge, Councillor. And given that we're opening up new work fronts at Cosburn shortly, and the increased work at Minton, it's probably worth a revisit. As you know, we did a lot of work last summer, I believe it was, at Pape and Danforth specifically, and working with your office and working with Derek on potential solutions. And maybe it's time for us to take another look as we open up more work fronts. So happy to keep an eye on that. It is an ongoing challenge. We have lots of trades, lots of workers at our sites that don't live in the neighborhood and don't live anywhere near the neighborhood. So it's a challenge, but it's something we need to figure out and work with the community and work with yourself on making sure that things are done at least as smoothly as possible and that we're not creating inconveniences for the people who live on those streets. I will just point out, I want to point out that Trustee Ehrhardt's got her hand up politely, and
Oh God.
Turn it over to her.
She's so polite. Can I just before you do that, Sarah, I just want to say, Michael, when the Ridgepoint redid the hospital, that they actually had all the staff parking at Dundas and Carlaw, and they would ferry them back and forth every day because that was a commitment that they made in order to build that. So it's also an option to find a strategic location and move people back and forth. And with that, I'll just go right to you, Sarah.
That's a great lead-in, Councillor Fletcher, because one of the things I wanted to share was that when there was major work happening at Michael Garron, which involved a lot of trucks going in and out, including hauling, and this was another provincial infrastructure project taking place, there was dialogue with the R.H. McGregor School and community around those trucks. And that is something that is customary, even with private projects that are taking place on or near schools when they're large and when there are a lot of trucks. And so I'm coming back to trucks because in seeing the presentation here for approved haul routes, and we only see some here, and I understand these are just for some trucks, hauled trucks, they're not for concrete mixers. The information that I get through the Construction Liaison Committee and the slides that are publicly available, it is through Metrolinx, is very hard for the community to distill. So just by way of example, and this is my perspective, as school board trustee who's part-time, like trustee's not a full-time position, and also I'm a parent, right? So I do try to find out where is it safe for me to navigate with my child in the East End, right? So it says here, this is from December, approximately 30 trucks per day will be leaving the site to haul excavated material. That's the bullet that tells me about how many trucks there will be at Salmon Avenue. Then it says on the same slide, it's slide 12 of 24, truck haul routes will be on Pape Avenue from the site to O'Connor Drive for both inbound and outbound trucks. That's my understanding of the public information on Metrolinx's site on what I understand is haul routes. It's 2 text bullets that are in the PowerPoints on a monthly basis. It's not a visual and it's not an element that I can find in a notice. It's not shared with schools. It's not shared with licensed childcare centers or recreation operators in the city, as I understand it. So I get a lot of questions about where are trucks going and what should I do to avoid trucks. And I have no way to guide any parent. And I do see that there's also questions around cement concrete mixers. I have no information from Metrolinx around approximately how many concrete mixers we're anticipating to go. I heard Jones, I heard Leslie. So I'm just trying to put you in the space of a parent, and 30 a day doesn't sound like too much, but we also hear up to 10 times that amount on some routes. We don't know when it starts. We don't know when it stops. We don't know if it's 24 hours. We don't know if it's just during the day. The information being presented at the monthly meetings for people to follow up in is just text bullets within, like, buried. It's not, I'm not implying that it's buried deliberately, but it's very hard to access. So tonight is one of the first times I've seen very clearly, visually, at a public meeting, a route, which is also different from the text that has been getting shared in the CLCs, as Dawnlands has not been referenced in the CLCs that I've attended or where I've been frequently checking the PowerPoint. So I really want to emphasize that in the communication of trucking plans that you've committed to share with the community, that it be visual and that it be easily accessible on your website, and that there be communications like you do for notices when we expect increases in the frequency of activity. That would be my appeal to you. As you know, I've written requesting this in very general ways, but I think it's really important to build community understanding as well about just how many trucks and where. I hope that makes sense, and I'd love to hear your response about what you can do around communicating this with our community, and thank you.
It makes perfect sense, and I totally hear you as also a parent and a resident and a community member, and what I'm hearing is sort of a bit of hunger for a little more detail and some data. It's something that we are looking at doing across Ontario Line, and again, certainly in this specific area of PAPE, mapping out all of the routes. And as we're hearing tonight, you know, I have my GIP contractor colleagues here tonight, but I have a lot more contractors working on this project than just GIP. And so what we want to do is move towards something like a map that we could have posted that shows routes and is very consistent. To your point, nothing bothers me more than imprecision or inconsistent details. And so it's important to me that we have consistent facts. But moving towards something like a map where we have hauling and trucking and supply routes for all of our jobs that's accessible, that's something that we'd like to move towards. As I've said earlier, and I'll say again, it absolutely requires us to work closely with the city, which we do. And I value all of the input we get from the city, because they bring a perspective to this that we need to hear directly from Navi and his team and from Derek and his team. And so that's close collaboration we'll have. But as we review haul routes and trucking routes across Ontario Line and specifically on PAPE, that's something that we want to move towards is a little more holistic and a little more of an overview that shows the Metrolinx view of Ontario Line and doesn't just focus on one or two sites, but as many as 6 or 7 different sites all at once, from Langley all the way north to Minton.
Thanks, Michael. Just getting close to the end. I've just got 4 quick ones. What do they call that? Rapid fire. Let's do a rapid fire for some questions here. Question about when do you think we'll have the first inkling about the route from the Riverdale Plaza? Can you ballpark that? 2 months, 1 month, 5 months?
Let's say it's in the range of 2 to 3 months.
2 to 3 months. Okay. Thank you.
This is specifically to the tunnel spoils and tunnel haulage. Give us at least 2 to 3 months.
You'll have a draft for comment and then keep going to get that. Okay, thank you. Second, there are just some questions, Kelly, about quick answers to emails, including about the precondition survey, that people are saying they're not getting the answers. So I thought you would want to hear that. You've seen that in the question and answer, and that would be upsetting for you.
It is, and I really appreciate your honesty to the community for that. I mean, it's definitely not the service standard that is an expectation. So, if you're emailing and people are not responding back to you, then I need to take that away with the team, and we need to do better. So, we have to be here for you, and that is one way that we're here for you. And if it's not working, then I need to do better there. And I will definitely be working with the team over the next little bit to find ways that can be improved.
Thank you very much for that. I know that's much appreciated, Kelly. And the other one is the Eaton crosswalk. Well, the Eaton was a PDO, the paid duty, and now we've gone to a crosswalk without the paid duty. And there's just, I don't know how, and maybe Navi, this is something you can help with. Everybody jump in. How can we make sure that we have this the safest situation ever at PAPE and Eaton? Because it's a very busy, it's a big construction site. How are you evaluating is that working now? Does more have to be done? I think there are some community concerns that may have been safer with the paid duty officer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, you rightfully pointed out there was a paid duty officer deployed at that crossing, primarily before the crossing was actually lighted. But right after, it operated without any assistance from any of the traffic control personnel. And then later on, City deployed a traffic agent, because during one of the site visits that I noticed that many people were forgetting to press that button and pointing, towards the direction that they wanted to travel. And, in some cases, they were just coming all of a sudden in front of the vehicles, and vehicles were abruptly stopping. So it was really a safety concern. So we immediately acted on it, deployed traffic agents for 2 weeks. I went there today again, and I again noticed that there were some distance between the buttons where the buttons are located, and some people were forgetting again to press those. So, Councillor, we're going to be enhancing the signage there and keeping to monitor the situation, and if need be, we're going to redeploy the traffic agents to ensure that the pedestrians cross there safely.
Yes. Safety, I think, is everybody's number one issue here tonight. So thank you for that. Last question is the BIA. So I'm just going to make a pitch, John, for the PAPE BIA. Everybody here, a lot of people living on PAPE, please shop local, whether it's Greektown or PAPE BIA, and look for all those Canadian produce and products. But for sure to support the businesses, because there's this tremendous impact from the Ontario line, particularly to all the businesses on PAPE. And then there's all of the work that's at PAPE and Gowan. How long is that going to take place for? Because it's having quite an impact on those businesses on the west side of the street, south of Gowan. So the chair of the BIA is here tonight, and he'd like to have that answered, if we can, please.
On the timing, I'm feeling a little bit on the spot here.
Okay.
I don't want to commit to something and be wildly wrong, but if that's something we could follow up directly with the BIA, we'd be happy to do that and confirm. We are nearing the end. It's getting closer to finished. I don't want to give a specific time.
Okay, I understand. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think a conversation with BIA would be helpful. And then after the demolition, what's going to go up? Is there going to be hoarding or something? The street really looks, if you look online and you go on Google Maps, you see, oh, this is a really interesting, active street. And when you go there now, it's really shut down because of the expropriation. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, after that, what are you going to put in place that enhances the street again, that it doesn't look like it does now?
So the temporary fencing will be replaced with plywood hoarding, and then that hoarding will be dressed with our standard Metrolinx signage, as well as branding for Ontario Line, and as well as any safety or directional signage that's needed. But it will be the more standard black painted plywood hoarding, which will be maintained and kept graffiti free, and won't be as temporary in nature as the fence looks today.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to that, bright colors on PAPE one more time. All right, everybody, we've gone long over our hour and a half. And so, as I said earlier, we have all of the questions. They'll get all over to Metrolinx or whoever else they might go to. And we'll send out that email address so everybody has that. And Kelly, you're saying you're going to be checking, make sure that that system is really up and working very well. I really want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I want to thank all of our guests. It was really important to have this conversation. We can't have enough conversations about safety. Everybody on here, eyes and ears on the street and watching what's happening. And I think it's always a great input for you. So thanks, everybody. I'm just going to let Peter and Sara give a thanks, and Michael, and then away we go.
I'll jump in to say thank you. I'm pleased to hear that there is increased crossing support that's going to be coming to this intersection. So thank you. I'm hopeful that we can start to communicate again around all of these important matters. And I appreciate everyone's time tonight. And thanks very much to our community for all that you are doing, as Councillor Paula Fletcher said, eyes and ears for the entire community and all of this. So thank you very much.
And if I may, Paula, thank you very much for pulling all of this together. My thanks to city staff, to Metrolinx staff, to GIP for being here this evening, but more than anything, to the community for taking part in this meeting. You've raised very substantial issues, ones that I hope we'll get some substantial answers to over the next month to 2 months. This is going to be a big part of our lives for years to come. We need to get it right. We can't afford any more injuries or deaths. Injuries. I hope there will be no deaths. And certainly we know the work is important, and so is protection of the community. So I look forward to further meetings, and I look forward to things being addressed so that the frustrations people feel will diminish, and hopefully, to the extent that they can be gone. Thanks.
Michael, did you want to say a few wrap words?
Just thank you to everybody for taking time out of your evening to spend here with us. I appreciate it very much. And thank you, Councillor. Thank you, MPP. Thank you, Trustee, for your time and for hosting us. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you shopping on PAPE. How about that? For coffee and lots of great stuff. Thanks very much, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.